The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Peridata webinar, Low-Risk Cesarean Section Rates, What Your Data Can Tell You. I'm Eva Fastbinder-Brubble, and I will be moderating today's session. So this is brought to you by the Wisconsin Association for Perinatal Care. If you have any questions or need to contact us at any time, there's our contact information that you can refer to. We want to thank our activity planners today, and none of these activity planners had any conflicts to disclose. We welcome back our distinguished faculty, Alan Cooper, who is a partner at Ancilla Partners in Milwaukee, and Lisa Locken, clinical nurse specialist with Ascension, St. Joseph, and Elbrook Memorial Hospital in Milwaukee. And those are the disclosures, notice of disclosures for your reference. There are no conflicts of interest or no other disclosures to report. Before we begin, you, the audience, is in listen-only mode unless you raise your hand. So please note the hand icon in your GoToWebinar control panel and go ahead and click on that if you'd like to speak, and I would be happy to take you off mute. We do encourage you to go ahead and ask your questions in this manner directly using your phone or computer microphone. You can also ask questions by typing them into the question field, and I or the presenters will communicate those as we receive them. To see that question pane, expand your control panel by clicking on that orange arrow, and you should see that option come up. If we don't get to your question due to any time constraints, WAPC staff and speakers will respond via email following the session. So if you have any questions after the session, just email them to wapc@perinatalweb.org. If you are having any technical problems with your connection as far as hearing the presentation or seeing the presentation, it's best to email Barb Wienholtz directly or give her a call. Probably better yet, give her a call at that number you see there at extension 201. And our course objective, by the end of this session, you will be able to identify at least 2 ways to maximize use of Peridata, summary, and patient-level reports, assist you with your low-risk primary cesarean section quality improvement work. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lisa.
Oops, I'm already having technical difficulties. Oh, my screen. I'm going previous.
That's okay.
Okay, my first thing is, do you know what the NTSV % is for your site? So we're going to start out with a little poll here to see whether you have any idea what it is. There's not really a right or wrong answer, but if you can fill in the poll as to yes or no, whether you know about what is going on at your facility or facilities.
Great. Go ahead and vote if you haven't already. Looks like the votes are coming in quickly. Give you about 10 more seconds. Okay, everybody's voted.
Okay, well, we are going to get the results in a couple more slides here, just to keep you waiting with bated breath. I did want to do making a case for the NTSV. Why do we do this? First of all, we're making a push through ACOG to reduce the primary cesarean section rate. The other reason the NTSV is important is because it levels the playing field. It's looking at basically low-risk women. So whether you have a very high-risk unit or a very low-risk unit, it levels the playing field. The other thing that we do is it's often helpful to do rolling 12-month reports for things like this to help flatten things out, because month over month you can see some real bouncing around happening. So we do want to take that into consideration as you're going along. Now, what is the NTSV anyway? I put this on here because oftentimes we get asked by providers and so forth about what exactly is this? And again, pretty easy on the nulliparous front. but term, it is from 37 weeks on. And sometimes this can get confusing as we focus on less than 39 weeks for that early elective delivery measure. So again, this is anything considered 37 weeks and up. And it's also women who have a singleton and are vertex. This particular measure, in the one hand, is super easy because it's just a flat out, no exclusions. If you're going to make sure you're doing a C-section for all cases. So even if it's what you'd call a highly medically indicated reason, all comers are in there. And again, today we are focusing on NTSV as an example, but as I go along in here, do note that many of the concepts we're using could be applied for whatever other quality improvement measures you have going on. As we talk about NTSV, make sure that your providers know this as well, that theoretically a large number of these women should deliver vaginally. But the endpoint can be affected by many things. And we really don't know what a good number of this would be. Years ago, like probably in the early 2000s, ACOG had set a target of 15.5, and Healthy People 2020, because at that time we were seeing that nationally it was probably up in the high 20s, low 30s. They set a target of 23.9. And again, nationally, you can see a wide variation among hospitals and practices. So this is part of why we are taking a look at this nationally. So now, let's see the results of the poll, please. So can you guys see that?
I think they should be able to.
Okay, then what I'm seeing here is that 60% of the people on the call do know what their NTSV rate is, and 40% do not know, which is good. I would suggest that if you don't know what it is at your place, that's something that you can go ahead and try to find out. So, and I also think that based on who's all on the call and what role they have, that would be something that may or may not be top of mind. But I would suggest if you don't know what it is, go ahead and find out. Moving along then, just to keep this in perspective, some information that I had run not too long ago showed that nationally, which of course has a big lag in data, in approximately 2011 to 15, it was about 26% with an, I found an average somewhere at 27.1. Probably for the last year it was available. And then the top 10% or 90th percentile was sitting at 14.3. So the top performers were down at 14.3, but you can see the average is quite high up there at 27.1. Wisconsin, we do a rolling 12 months, which is at least 1 quarter behind, and I took this from Checkpoint. The average at the moment is 22%, so you can see that compared to nationally, and again, there could be some variation in years here, but we're only at 22, so Wisconsin tends to perform better to begin with, and however, our top 10% fairly close at that 14.0. Now, if you're going to go ahead and take a, we'll go ahead and do the next poll if we could. And again, this is not a test. It's not like you're going to be graded on it. But do you know where you primarily get your NTSV information from? And we can do that poll, please.
So please go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, about 2/3 have voted, so maybe another 15 seconds here.
And again, there's no wrong answer here particularly.
Okay, I think that's all.
Okay.
All right, we'll close it out. Do you want to share that right away?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so we have 25% having no idea. Thank you for your honesty there. 33% says my quality department does it for outside agencies. Joint Commission summary, no one picked that. 38% had checkpoint summary, and no one said I use either TJC or checkpoint. So as we get going here, I will be able to tell you, are we ready to share the slides again? The
Sure.
NTSV, okay, the summary reports are available either via checkpoint or Joint Commission. You can get the exact same thing off of either which one, so do note that it's recording the same thing. Reminder to everyone that the date range being used, this measure goes by the date that the woman was discharged, and this is a required field in order to do the calculation. So if you don't have that part filled in, you aren't going to get an answer for this. And again, why is discharge date used here? It's because that's what's required for the Joint Commission measure. They have a hard time understanding and using date of birth. Okay. Another thing that, as we're going to go along in here, field list reports can be useful as a reference to you as you're getting started. So keep that in mind as we move along. Now, if we're actually going to go ahead and do an NTSV summary report, first thing is to take a time range that you're going to use. You're going to use the aggregate information, and in this case, I'm talking about a summary. You can maybe do it for just one facility or for more than one. Oftentimes, people do use a rolling 12 months, but you may also report out by quarter or whatever else. And I would suggest that you keep tabs on this monthly. You might do that rolling thing, but you do want to keep going on it. Now, where do you get these reports from? If you're at the main menu, you go into Reports Server, which takes you into Pentaho, and you browse files. And then this is going to bring up all of the reports. So again, you could go to the Joint Commission reports, you could go to the checkpoint reports, and it's going to show you the information. I believe my example I'm showing here happens to come off of Joint Commission. In this case, we want the summary, which is the, again, aggregated for all your sites. It's just one single number. And here's a demonstration of what that looks like, just the NTSV or PCO2 number. So let's say in whatever time period we used for all, if this were a small facility, this might be in almost an entire year. For another one, it might be a month, whatever the case may be. But there's a number of things here. First of all, it's making sure all of my records were filled in. It says that 100% were. And it tells me how many of these patients were excluded and how come. We had a lot of them because they're multiparous, some for gestational age, and others had multiple gestation. Right now, take a look at this number because we're going to come back to it later. We had 11 out of 54 for 20.37%. Now, if we want to take a look differently and start to take a look because we're wanting to know what individuals do, that can be important too, who's got what kind of numbers. We can either do it by attendant or by OB primary care provider. And the reason, or the way you determine this is who's most likely to influence the outcome that you're looking for. In cases of things like things that affected the prenatal care, things that might have influenced the admission, those are usually the OB primary care provider. Sometimes we also use that people who have large clinics and so on usually put it in for that because the attendant might be just be the doc on call. As far as who influences the delivery, a lot of times that's more likely to be the attendant. So because we're talking here about NTSV, you're going to want to use the attendant rather than OB-PCP. And in the summary, we can do all attendants, or we can even go down and stay in the summary and pick a name from a drop-down if you want to see an individual. And sometimes with that, you may even need a rolling 24 months for those who have a very small denominator. So here, in this case, we're still on these reports. All attendants here, what that will do is, let's say you have 10 attendants, it's going to have 10 pages showing each one of the attendants. If you want to go and see the actual name of it from a drop-down for just a particular person, I want to see Dr. A or whomever, I'm going to go in, pick on attendant here, and then find which person I want. Maybe it's alpha resident here that I'm looking for. So now another poll. Which way do you want to run a summary report to identify providers who will affect the outcome of the delivery?
Please go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, about 10 more seconds, everybody. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that.
Okay.
And share the results.
Okay, 100% put by attendant. Very good. Now keep some of this information in mind. There may be something later on for you to do with this as well. Now, as we're talking about the NTSV calculation here, what is contributing to it? I did want to point out on the denominator why we start getting so much filtering out of here. As you can imagine, probably close, and I learned this from Marianne Weiss years ago, probably about a third of your patients are going to be nulliparous. So if you want to keep that in mind, that's often going to dump out a third of what you're talking about. There's certainly other factors, patient factors, that will weed out more depending on what your service is. Again, prematurity, multiples, and that type of thing. And the other thing is also consider how aggressive your providers are about doing breach versions. You know, not every breach has to stay a breach. So those who are a little bit more aggressive about doing it and very successful with it, you might be able to bring that number down quite nicely. Here's an example of what these numbers look like. If you had one of your providers does about 100 deliveries in a year's time, only about 33 would be nulliparous. And if you take out those early being breach or multiple, let's say you have 30. Now, if this provider had 5 C-sections, that would make their rate 16.7%, which actually would be pretty good given the statistics that we've been seeing. In another example, if I have a new provider, and maybe they've only done 40 deliveries a year, or maybe that's all they ever do, only about 13 would be nulliparous. And if we take out those same ones, let's say this person also had 5 C-sections. Their rate would come to 41.7%. So now that's outlying pretty substantially. On the other hand, they only had 12 cases. So sometimes when you're under 12 like that, you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. So you want to kind of take a look at that type of thing when you're doing it. And again, as this new provider has more points of data, you might want to keep rolling that along to see how that's going. What you're looking for with all of this stuff is patterns and trends. Are we going up, down? Are we staying steady? And how does this compare to the national or state numbers? And as I mentioned before, kind of watch out for fewer than 25 cases. Okay, now my page down is misbehaving itself. There we go. What you also want to be doing then is looking at primary cesarean sections. What is driving things at my hospital? This is where you start to look at the finer points with this. So in this case, you probably want to take a look at some of your patient level data for that same time period. This shows the cases for numerator and denominator. You can do chart reviews on these cases as needed, and it can possibly even be pooled with other information for provider performance if need be. One thing I did want to mention is I was showing you information that came off of the Joint Commission report, but there is something that can be useful that's in the archives, and it's off of the prior checkpoint reports. I would highly recommend it because it can show cases of cesarean section that she did not have a trial of labor. And you can go and check those. Usually it's not too many, but it can be case finding for the reasons. So usually there's, again, not very many, and you can look them up. Certainly there's a lot of things that are what I'd call legit, if you will. Active herpes, placenta previa, even we can argue all day long whether maternal choice really is or isn't, but it is acceptable. So those might all be good reasons, if you will, for having not even doing a trial of labor. However, you also want to watch patterns with certain providers. How come, 90% of our people pretty much let everyone have a trial of labor, and then there's others who maybe don't? And do I see a question out there? Oh, I got to find my question.
Yeah, there's a question as to whether we're going to send out the slides.
Oh.
So.
And I'll let you answer that one.
I
posted it up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we probably could do that if it's okay, with you. So.
Yeah, I'm not. The slides themselves, for sure, it's not got anything good or anything on it.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. So that's what the archive report is. I did want to also talk about the detailed data extract because, of course, that's kind of where you're doing all your mining. And again, if you're especially doing the comprehensive one, it has all fields in order to drill down into what my specific questions are that I want to answer. So where do I go get that? Again, it's in the things detailed data extract. If you're wanting a comprehensive one, you do that. It does take longer to run because of all the fields than the condensed one does. Complementary to that are field list reports. Once you get that detailed data extract, you know what's in the field list. So I do have a question. Have you used the field list reports? Have you looked at them?
Please go ahead and vote. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close that and share the results with you.
Okay. So it looks like the vast majority have not done that, which is okay. Again, I want to make sure you know what it is so that you can go ahead and use it as you're trying to sift through your data. Thank you. So again, the detailed field report can be used to determine what fields are important to you and maybe do a little less scrolling around when you actually get to the detailed data extract. The field list report comes in a number of different ways. I do, as you can see, the Excel version only has the one that's got the numerators and denominators listed in there, but there are PDFs and Excels. What I would say is it's best to probably go get this as you need it because it can change it at any time as new fields are added and so on. And it would be really long if you're going to print it, so I really wouldn't advise that. So where do we get that? Again, I can go into field list reports, and then this filterable data dictionary, Excel, is the one that is the most useful, and then I'm going to be showing you in a minute. At least useful for our purposes, I should say. So when you do that, it comes up with all this stuff here. So if you really only wanted to see something about I don't know, infant fetal mortality, you could just click on that. But in general, I would just hit view report so that it brings up the whole thing. And then once it's up here, again, I'll show it in a little bit in a different way. It brings out a whole bunch of stuff, but in this column G here, this is where the detailed data report column is listed. So if you really wanted to know if there was just, say, a fetal death, I guess, you could go to column U, and that's where it would be found. And if you needed a phone number for some reason, RX is where you could find that. Okay, now what can contribute to the risk for cesarean section? This is where, as you're going along, working on your quality improvement projects, you might want to have your teams taking a look at, okay, where do we think we want to drill in here to find out what exactly has been going on with our patients, and where might we make a difference in our quality improvement efforts? Because what you're going to want to do is either find where your low-hanging fruit is for things I could fix pretty readily, or go after, gee, where does our biggest issue seem to be? So I listed a few up here, like induction of labor if it's not really indicated, low or unfavorable Bishop score, the ever popular impatience. For example, people maybe not be very familiar with the newer definitions of what active labor is. What type of labor support has mom had? Maybe oxytocin's not being run effectively, either too slow, too fast, whatever. Certainly there's physiology too, such as the fit of the baby's tolerance to labor, any other pathology, and so on. And again, your team can add in their ideas as well based on what's going on. And then, as I kind of mentioned, what does the team want to work on, and what do you want to measure? Because eventually, too, you have to know how do I know the change is sort of sticking? Other things to consider as you're doing this are there any patterns or trends that you want to take a look at? So for example, your numbers, let's say they went really up, but then you determine, you know what, we had a group of providers leave, and maybe they were diluting the numbers, and now that they're not here, our numbers are up. Conversely, you could have somebody arrive as a new group, that type of thing. Certainly your volumes can change these numbers a little bit because, again, of the pool of patients that you have in there. And then you also may get some type of patterns or trends based on what's your provider mix. Do I have a lot of certified nurse midwives, family practitioners, clinic patients? Maybe you have a laborist or maybe you don't, that type of a thing. So those are all things to consider. And now what I'd like to do is demonstrate some patient-level data. We're going to do some stuff with filters, pivot tables, individual cases, and so on. And again, if you do have a question, please feel free to either raise your hand and I can have our trustee assistants help out with that, or type in a question as we're going along here. I'm going to get out of the show for right now and go into some of this stuff. First, what I did want to show you is this, again, is the field list. One of the things I like to do in most any of these things is make sure that I have added filter, and then it goes way to the end here, but like this. And again, we can go to my detailed data report column to go find something, looking down for what we need. I will point out some other things along the way here. We have the definition. I'm going to go down so you can see it more. The data entry usage, so when does it open up? When do you have to put something in? Which reports are in there? And then over here, the measures. So for example, if I'm really not sure what's contained in PC02 here, which is in column S, I can just get rid of those blanks. And these are the only things that are in there. 2 numerators and then several things in the denominator. So if I go back over, we're looking for previous pregnancies, admission date, how many babies, presentation, and route of delivery, due date, and when she went home. That's all that's in that one. So do know that this thing has all kinds of information in here that I can use to look up and refer back to for something. If I really want to know a field name for something like abnormal heart rate pattern, I can find that. That's column AGC. So that's how that kind of works that way. Are there any questions on the field list report?
Lisa, this is Alan.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd also highlight is that the other columns to the left, navigation screen and group name, I find to be very helpful if you don't exactly know where a field is, or you may not even remember exactly what the name is, but you kind of know what it relates to, whether it's the, as simple as the infant. It's really the infant. I don't remember exactly what the field name is, but those types of filters to the left, navigation screen and group name, can help you get to those answers quicker. They are all kind of set up in order in a way that if you went into Peridata and actually looked at a particular birth record, these align exactly the way that they're being entered into the system.
So yes, you can see if what was antenatal risk factors, prior pregnancies, et cetera, et cetera. So some of this, especially if you have some familiarity with what is in the data entry screens, these things can be very, very helpful. And yes, to Alan's point, you probably don't need to go to field name unless you're really, really sure what you're looking for. So thank you, Alan. Now, some other information to take a look at would be, let's say I did pull the C-section rate. Again, this happens to be off Joint Commission, but you could do it off a checkpoint. As you will recall from our prior slide, that we had 11 out of 54 women for 20.37% who fell into this measure. So now, these first ones, I can take a look at what's going on over there. Now, some of these fields are blank, I'll have you know, just because I was taking out data that does not really belong in here. Now, up here at the top, the first 12 of these are seem to have some clinic patients in there. So if I wanted to filter on that, I could also check to see whether there's something going on there. Maybe I just want to see what's going on with clinic. And I can see who was the attendant and what was going on with them there. So this is a quick way to do some filtering on this type of thing. I'm trying to see what I put over here. Yeah, that's where we added it in. What you can also do, and I think I'll wait on that in a little bit later. A couple of other things that I might want to do while I'm in this one is to take a look at, again, maybe I know that some of my attendants are in the same group together. So let's see what happens if I do AA, CD, NN, and TT. Now, this is sort of made up, so let's see what happens here. But in this case, it was, we wound up with this many cases in here. And it comes out, if I recall, if I did my math right, to about 23.1%. If I go do it a different way, what about this other group, group 2? Oh, I know it. It's, never mind. Yeah, this is the one now. 6 out of 26. Now, if I want to go check another group, what I can do is check for AAA, BB, PP, and RR. Now, when I look at those folks, we only had 1 out of 10 here, so they're only at 10%. So what might this tell us in general? Or is there something going on with that group rather than the other one as to why their numbers are different? And then lastly, what if I wanted to look at a particular provider because of something that was going on? I can also do that. And in this case, let's say I just wanted to do CD. Okay, that one was 2 out of 8, but then out of that amount, they had a fair number that were with the clinic. So that way you're taking a look at what's going on with that. For their own patients, they didn't have any. They all happen to be patients that were other than their own. So we may want to take a look at what's going on that way. So that's an example of what you can do just off of that thing. In addition, you may want to take a look at that detailed data extract to see what kind of information you want to get from there. Again, if I know some of my columns that I'm going for, I can go look at those. I did put something together on a pivot table just to show you a couple of things. I took and placed birth facility, and the columns I have type of C-section, which is, we're looking at the primary ones here primarily, and then fetal intolerance of labor. I was trying to take a look at who was having some intolerance of labor, both on the nulliparous and primariparous women. And also looking at what were they in labor prior to the C-section. So here's the looking at that and how many were actually in labor ahead of time. So we did have a fair amount going on that way. What else you can do is, if I really want to see one of these, I should be able to open that up and then start to taking a look at which patients these are. So that's something else that you can take a look at. I'm trying to think, there's other stuff. If I wanted to take a look at something, let's say we decide that I want to take a look at a couple of things. Here's Alan, where I can let you maybe do some helping. We went in and combined the low-risk C-section in this other test file. And Alan, is there a way to very quickly go find just a couple of these columns, or would I just want to go look at, like, if Bishop's score is in JM, do I just slide on over to it?
I mean, if you know it's JM, yeah, I don't think there's any faster way of going to an actual column unless you actually know the name
that
of
was
the
on that
row. Yep.
JM. So let's say we say, let's go looking at Bishop's score. Well, what? I've got NA on this. Maybe we determine what's going on. I want to check on that. How come no one has that filled in? You can go check a few charts, or you can look at, is it because there's a practice issue that no one ever documents it? Or do I have some kind of a data entry issue where things are not getting entered into peridata.net? And if that's the case, you may decide, you know what, for our program, we really want to have things opened up to be able to tell what the Bishop score is, so that we're not having to go back into all these charts to figure out exactly what's going on for our patients. So that's something else that you can take a look at. I think a lot of times what people may want to pull out are things like which attendants had things around fetal intolerance of labor. So for example, if I wanted to go to that happens to be LU. Now, are you seeing a little thing for my GoToWebinar?
No.
Good. Okay. Then we can see that, hey, in this bunch of people, this is how many fetal intolerances of labor. And I might want to go look at that, especially from the standpoint of what is going on with that? How is that explained? Maybe we thought we had people running oxytocin too aggressively or something. We could go look at that and then find these cases and just go take a look at which cases were falling out. So that then is something else that you can do. So, and on a more sophisticated level, here's where I might ask Alan to help out. He was able to pull together a test file where we took the information from the Joint Commission detail example here for low-risk C-section, and again, you could have done checkpoint. And he was able to import all of the stuff then moving through here as far as all the other columns. So that does require an index report, and the only thing that that's going to do if you add it on to here is the column that it was coming from off of the detailed data extract is going to change. But it does allow you, if you just wanted to check these, let's say I only want to know which patients were in the denominator. If I do that, I only have these 54 cases, and then I can start taking a look at which ones of these things I need to filter out. I took my filter off. And so in these cases, I can go see, okay, we saw the fetal intolerance of labor for the other way. What might it look like over here? Just the yeses. 2, 4, 6, 7 of those patients had it. So again, you might go and check out what was going on with them. Out of those 7, every single one of them wound up in the numerator. So that's a big reason for why a primary C-section is done, which I guess is not really surprising. But that's kind of how you go ahead and do all of that stuff. So I think I could open it at this time to see if there's other questions about how to kind of look around in your data for different things.
Yeah, please go ahead and raise your hands if you have a question, or we're also watching the question pane for any typed questions as well. I don't see any at this time.
Okay.
Lisa, maybe yes, you can highlight the fact of how to kind of bridge the two different types of information together with basically using the Perinatal Net ID. You know, we won't use this time to explain, you know, how to leverage functions like indexes or VLOOKUPs and what have you that if some know what I'm talking about, you know, you should leverage the Perinatal Net ID to be your primary key to really bring over information from one source of an Excel spreadsheet to another, to the kind of the area you're trying to understand what is going on with a particular birth or patients. But if you don't know what any of that means, but you want to be able to try to do what Lisa just is attempting to demonstrate here, how you can basically provide enriched data to a smaller report, whether it's the Joint Commission one or the checkpoint summary detail one. Sometimes you just may want to know something more about a particular birth that could highlight a trend within your organization. I'd strongly suggest you contact the Peridata support and schedule, 15, 20 minutes, and we can actually set you up with at least a template that you could use. We'll do our best to explain how it's done, but a bare minimum, at least you'll have something to work with, and then don't hesitate to contact us, for additional help, because this could be pretty powerful for anyone that's into understanding the depths of why a particular birth outcome is the way it is.
Yes, thank you, Alan. So again, the peridata.net ID is probably the most unique number that you're going to have in there, especially depending time frame you're running on. Theoretically, I suppose, depending if you go long enough, you could have a mom in there twice if you're doing like a rolling 2-year. And so the ID number would also be the unique identifier there. So in this case, we have it here, and then when he added those files in from the detailed data extract, it came back in over here as the matchup. So hopefully that makes some sense. The other thing that I would like to see, and maybe here's where I can ask Alan to jump in a little bit. On this detailed data extract sheet here, which I think I had already, maybe if I get rid of this filter, they'll all come back. Okay, if we had this whole thing and I wanted to do just a couple of columns here, can you show how to put those in? We who had started that the other day over here. Could I ask you to put in a couple of columns, please?
Sure. So, basically, we leverage the function I typically leverage for Excel is called indexes. You can also do things called VLOOKUP. Essentially, it's just a function that allows you to go use what we call a primary key or a unique key of a particular data set and actually pull in other information that it finds in another source data set in order to bring over another piece of information. So as an example, if we go back to the detail extract, you'll notice here's the Peridata ID. And let's just say that there's certain information in this particular report that you only want 5 or 6 columns of it that you want to isolate.
And so could I choose columns that I'd like you to isolate?
If you want to go to them for me, and then I will do
HQ.
That.
Are we all getting seasick here? Okay, HQ for in labor on admission.
Okay. So basically, if you want to, let's just do this one for instance. So if you want a piece of information, and whether it's yes, no, or I don't know if there's any other, if it's NA is part of this or not, but if you want to know what the values are for a particular birth that it's in your other report, you basically reference the primary key in this case, which would be Peridata ID right here, back to the one that is on this file, which is right here. And then you tell it, once you find the identifier on this column, which row is this at? And then essentially the formula kind of knows, oh, you want this particular cell in an Excel spreadsheet and grabs that value. So as Lisa stated, I basically kind of started with one of the columns like date of birth, and this was date of birth of time, and then this was race. You can essentially, once you get one started, we can do this for any individual that wants this done, and just, you copy and paste a new row, and then you could say, you know what? The only thing you need to really change is, this is how you kind of read it, is this is a piece of information that you want to grab for that particular birth ID or the Peridata ID. And then what you're going to do is you're going to match against the Peri ID in this file, which is right here, against the source file that contains the particular column that you're looking for. So in our case, we're looking at HQ. So all you really have to do in this case, because you already have the matching criteria set, is you just literally just change the formula there, and then you can just scroll all the way down and paste that formula. And now for these particular birth IDs or peridata IDs, now you know exactly what, I don't forget the column name.
Neighbor.
Now you know exactly what the values are for a particular peridata ID. And in that case, once you start to get like 4 or 5 columns you care about for whatever particular project you're doing, you can actually start to do pivot tables on this particular set of data and be able to generate summary, counts, etc.
Okay, so some of that may be more than you cared to know, and some of it not, but thank you for listening to that part. But the other idea then is you could make this, save this file, and as you're bringing new data in next month or whenever, you can sort through the same things to look for it. I know other people, when they don't want to do all of this, they will just take the main file, again, do the filter on it, and then start filtering by the thing. So maybe they want to just look at nulliparas who were induced or something like that. So however you want to do it, just know that there's a lot of different ways to do this. So again, before I continue back into the slides, is there anything else off of the patient level information that you would have a question about? How would I look for this as I'm doing a QI project?
Lisa, the only question we've had come in is just more generally, how do you access peridata? So not as specific, but just wanted you to know that that question has come in, and we've got about 8 minutes left here.
Okay, certainly anyone at your facility who would be desirable to have access to this can get access, and that provisioning goes through your security administrator. Is that correct, Alan?
Correct. Yeah, they would be the ones that you would make the request to at your facility to have them authorize you a user for a particular hospital. And if you don't know who that might be, just contact Peridata Support Help Desk, and we'll let you know who you should contact.
Yes, so at the end of the slides, there's a contact number for that. The alternative to that is if you're not the slicer or dicer, as it were, as long as there's someone in your organization who does have access and can readily get you some of these files, that's another means that some people would use also. Maybe you're some type of administrator. It's like, here's just the answer I want to know. I'm not going to go digging into it, but here's what I want to know, and you have someone else do it. But if you are the one who is going to need to access it, that is the thing you do. You need to get provisioned through your organization to be able to get at this stuff. So again, it's highly useful, but people have to be able to get in there and get the information out. So that's kind of the whole point with a lot of this. So thanks for that question. We're now going to go from the current slide, just as sort of a follow-up here. We ran the summary report for our particular case for the delivery, and now, which way do you run a summary report to identify providers who will affect the decision to induce? We'll open up the poll for this one and see, who do you think affects the decision to induce?
So yeah, go ahead and cast your vote if you haven't already.
Boy, oh boy, this bunch of folks is Johnny on the spot here.
Okay, just a couple more seconds, everybody. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that and share the results.
Okay, 100%. Very good. Again, if you're looking at who decided to induce, it's most likely that primary care provider. Obviously, once in a while, I suppose it's some weekend coverage or whatever, and it's somebody else. But in general, if I were doing a QI project on inductions, I'd be more likely to go after the primary care providers. Now, once in a while, you might want to take a look at back and forth on this from the standpoint of, is there one partner in a group or something that seems to be, maybe they decide to induce, but for some reason they're not on call when the delivery happens, and is there any influence going back and forth there? So you can take a look at that type of thing as well. Again, the best thing to do is determine what you're trying to find out, and then the best way to get at that information. Quality improvement is ongoing, it's ever-changing, and the main thing I want to put in here at the end is, of course, follow where your questions lead you. And probably not even where your questions lead you, but where the answers lead you. Because after you get one answer, that probably leads you to several other questions about, okay, now what do we want to know about this next subplot to it. Again, keep following it, keep looking at what's my rates, what's my trends. Maybe we've got a process going on now where we really did have a push on doing bishop scores. So now I take a look in there and, oh, great, we're seeing a lot more bishop scores in there, so now I've got that information in. And then maybe you start looking at, okay, which ones had favorable services at the time, especially on these nulliparous women, and maybe we look at that. So there's all kinds of things to do in general with all of that. And now, are there any final questions?
If so, please go ahead and raise your hand. We're also watching the question pane. I don't see any at this time.
Okay. Then, as promised, here's some contact information. We do have the Ancilla Help Desk number, so you can email at that number or call in. And then Alan's information and my information is on there as well. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of an idea of, if I'm working on a quality improvement type project, how might I sort of go after information? So you usually start probably at a big level and then start drilling on down. So thank you so much for your attention today, and hopefully you found this helpful.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending today.